How do millionaires build wealth? 12 things they refuse to buy to stay debt-free. There is a pattern hiding in plain sight. You have seen it in interviews, in biographies, in every documentary about people who built real wealth, and yet almost nobody names it out loud. It is not the stock they picked. It is not the business they started. It is something quieter, something that happens long before the first investment, long before the first dollar of profit. It is what they refuse to buy. Think about that for a second. Every person who has ever built lasting wealth made thousands of small decisions that never made it into the headlines. Nobody writes a book chapter about the car they did not buy. Nobody makes a documentary about the vacation they skipped. But those decisions, repeated year after year, are the actual engine behind every fortune you have ever admired. Here's the uncomfortable part. You have probably made the opposite decision this month, not because you are careless, not because you lack intelligence, because the entire system around you was built to make those decisions feel normal, even smart. And once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. In the next few minutes, you are going to walk through 12 things wealthy people consistently refuse to buy, and more importantly, why refusing feels natural to them and painful to almost everyone else. This is not a lecture about frugality. This is a map of how a completely different mindset operates underneath the surface of everyday spending. Stay with me, because what comes next will show you exactly where this pattern starts, and it is earlier than you think. The first thing to understand is that wealth is never built by accident. It looks accidental from the outside, almost like luck, almost like timing. But underneath every fortune, there is a repeated behavior, a decision made so many times it stopped feeling like a decision at all. Picture two people standing in the same store, looking at the same product. One of them buys it without a second thought. The other one pauses, and in that pause, a completely different question runs through their mind. Not, can I afford this, but what does this cost me 5 years from now? That single question, asked quietly and consistently, is the actual difference between the two financial futures that follow. This is what makes the pattern invisible. It does not look dramatic. Nobody films the moment someone chooses not to upgrade their phone or not to finance a car they cannot fully explain the need for. There is no applause for restraint. And because there is no applause, most people assume restraint does not matter. But wealth was never built in the visible moments. It was built in the invisible ones, the ones nobody was watching. Here is what makes this even more interesting. The people who build real wealth rarely describe themselves as disciplined. They describe the decision as obvious. Not buying something is not a sacrifice to them. It is simply the correct answer to a question they have trained themselves to ask automatically. That training did not start in adulthood. It did not start with their first paycheck or their first investment account. It started somewhere much earlier, somewhere most people never think to look. Every financial habit you carry today was installed before you ever earned a single dollar of your own. Think back to the house you grew up in. Think about what was said or never said about money at the dinner table. Some children grew up hearing that money was scarce, dangerous, something to fear and hoard. Others grew up watching money disappear the moment it arrived, spent as fast as it came in, as if holding on to it too long would somehow curse the household. Neither of those environments teaches a child how to build wealth. Both of them teach a child how to react to money, not how to direct it. And reaction is exactly what keeps most adults stuck. Here is the part almost nobody talks about. Children do not learn financial behavior from what their parents say. They learn it from what their parents do when nobody is explaining anything. A parent who stresses over bills while buying something impulsive to feel better is teaching a lesson far louder than any conversation about budgeting ever could. That contradiction gets absorbed, quietly, and it resurfaces decades later as an adult who intellectually knows better, but emotionally repeats the exact same pattern. This is why so many people can recite financial advice perfectly and still fail to follow it. The knowledge lives in the mind, but the habit lives somewhere deeper, somewhere installed long before logic had any say in the matter. Breaking that inherited pattern is not about learning something new. It is about noticing something old and choosing, consciously, for the first time, to do the opposite of what feels automatic. Once you understand where the habit comes from, the next question becomes impossible to ignore. What is a purchase actually costing you? Not in dollars, but in something far more limited and far more valuable. Every single thing you buy has a hidden price tag attached to it, one that never shows up on the receipt. That price is measured in hours of your life, hours you already traded away to earn the money in the first place. If you make a certain amount per hour and an item costs a certain number of hours of your labor, that item is not really priced in currency at all. It is priced in pieces of your one and only life. Most people never calculate this, and the reason is simple. Retailers, banks, and advertisers have spent enormous effort making sure the transaction feels instant, painless, disconnected from the labor behind it. A tap of a card, a few taps on a screen, and the exchange feels weightless. But the weight is still there, hidden behind the ease. Wealthy people, almost without exception, run this calculation instinctively. They do not ask what something costs. They ask how many hours of their life they are willing to hand over for it. Suddenly, a purchase that felt small becomes a decision about time, about freedom, about how many more years they will need to keep trading hours for money before they can stop. This single shift in perspective changes everything. It turns spending from an emotional reflex into a mathematical decision. And once you start seeing purchases as chunks of your own lifespan, it becomes far harder to spend carelessly and far easier to understand exactly why the wealthy protect their time as fiercely as they protect their money. Now, here is something that will make you look at your own spending very differently. Almost none of your financial decisions are made in a neutral environment. They are made inside a system that was deliberately engineered by extremely smart people to produce exactly the behavior you keep repeating. Credit was not invented to help you. It was invented to remove the natural resistance you would normally feel before spending money you do not have. Minimum payments on a card were not designed for your convenience. They were designed to keep a balance alive for as long as possible, generating interest for as long as possible. Store layouts, checkout flows, one-click purchases, buy now, pay later options, all of it exists for a single purpose: to shorten the distance between desire and purchase to nearly zero. The shorter that distance, the less time your rational brain has to intervene. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is publicly documented business strategy, refined over decades, tested relentlessly, and optimized for one outcome: keeping you spending. Once you understand this, something shifts. You stop blaming yourself entirely for impulsive purchases because you realize you are never operating on a level playing field. But you also stop feeling powerless because a system you can see is a system you can resist. Wealthy people are not immune to marketing. They are simply more aware that it exists, and that awareness alone changes how they respond to it. They ask a question most people never think to ask before paying. Would I still want this if nobody could see me with it, and if buying it took real friction instead of one single tap? That question alone breaks the trap that an entire industry was built to keep you inside of. With all of that understood, it is time to go through the 12 things wealthy people consistently refuse to buy. The first is the newest phone the moment it launches, not because the phone is bad, but because paying a premium for status that expires in 12 months makes no financial sense to someone thinking in decades. The second is a car payment that stretches for years, because a depreciating asset should never come with growing interest attached to it. The third is designer clothing purchased to impress people who will not remember it a week later. The fourth is a large home bought at the very edge of what a mortgage allows, because a house that consumes all your income leaves nothing left to invest. The fifth is extended warranties on items that rarely fail, a product built almost entirely on fear rather than actual risk. The sixth is subscription services that quietly accumulate and never get canceled, small leaks that drain thousands over a single year. The seventh is lottery tickets and get-rich-quick schemes, because wealth builders trust process over chance. The eighth is impulsive vacations financed on credit, turning a temporary experience into a long-term debt. The ninth is premium alcohol and dining used purely to signal success rather than to enjoy a moment. The 10th is brand new furniture and decor replaced constantly to match trends. The 11th is expensive gym memberships and equipment abandoned within months. And the 12th, the most overlooked of all, is convenience itself, paying extra again and again, simply to avoid small amounts of effort. Individually, none of these purchases look dangerous. Together, repeated for years, They represent the exact difference between a life of accumulation and a life spent quietly refilling a bucket with holes in it. Understanding these 12 refusals intellectually is one thing. Actually living them, day after day for years, requires something else entirely, and that something is what separates people who read about wealth from people who build it. That something is delayed gratification, and contrary to popular belief, it is not a personality trait some people are born with. It is a skill, trained the same way a muscle is trained, through repetition and deliberate discomfort. Your brain is wired to prefer a smaller reward now over a larger reward later. This is simple biology, inherited from a time when survival depended on taking resources immediately, before someone else did. But financial success in the modern world demands the opposite instinct, choosing the larger, distant reward over and over, even when every impulse screams for the smaller one today. Wealthy people are not immune to that impulse. They feel it exactly like everyone else does. The difference is repetition. Every time someone chooses to invest instead of spend, to wait instead of buy, to save instead of upgrade, that choice reinforces a neural pathway, making the next similar choice slightly easier than the one before it. Over years, what once required tremendous willpower starts to feel automatic, almost effortless. This is why financial discipline eventually looks like personality, when in reality it was built one repeated decision at a time. The uncomfortable truth is that anyone can build this same discipline, but only by accepting short-term discomfort in exchange for long-term freedom, a trade most people are never taught to make. To truly understand the power of this compounding pattern, picture two people who started their adult lives earning the exact same income. Same job, same salary, same starting point, no inheritance, no shortcuts. One of them spent according to how the income felt, upgrading their lifestyle every time their paycheck increased, financing a nicer car, moving into a bigger apartment, dining out more often as a reward for hard work. The other kept their lifestyle almost frozen in place, directing every raise, every bonus, every extra dollar toward investments instead of consumption. In the first year, the difference between them is almost invisible. Their bank accounts look similar, their lifestyles look similar, and from the outside, nobody would guess anything was different at all. But invisible gaps do not stay invisible forever. 5 years in, one of them has a mounting pile of depreciating possessions and a stack of monthly payments locking up their income. The other has a modest lifestyle and a quietly growing portfolio, compounding in the background unnoticed. 10 years in, the gap becomes undeniable. One person is still trading hours for dollars with no end in sight. The other has options, flexibility, and a portfolio doing a meaningful share of the work for them. Same income, same opportunities, completely different outcomes, and the only variable that changed was what each of them repeatedly refused, or repeatedly allowed, to buy. Here is where most people misunderstand the entire idea of financial refusal, assuming it means a smaller, more restricted life. It means the exact opposite. Every single dollar not spent on a depreciating purchase becomes available for something else entirely, and that something else is where real wealth actually gets built. The money that did not go toward a new car payment can go into an index fund quietly growing for 30 years. The money that did not go toward premium subscriptions can go toward a course, a certification, a skill that increases future earning power. The money that did not go toward status symbols can go toward owning a piece of a business, a rental property, an asset that generates income instead of consuming it. This is the fundamental reframe that changes everything. A refusal is never really a no. It is a redirection. Every time wealthy people decline one of these 12 purchases, they are not depriving themselves. They are quietly funding a different version of their future, $1 and one decision at a time. This is why so many people who eventually build significant wealth describe the process as boring, unremarkable, almost anticlimactic. There is no dramatic moment, no lucky break, just years of small, redirected decisions, compounding silently until one day the results become impossible to ignore. Wealth was never about how much money passes through your hands. It is about how much of it you allow to stay, grow, and work quietly on your behalf while you live your life. Every purchase you make from this point forward carries a question inside it, whether you choose to hear it or not. Is this decision moving me closer to freedom, or is it simply borrowing comfort from a future version of myself who will have to pay it back with interest? The 12 refusals covered here are not rules imposed from the outside. They are a mirror, reflecting how differently wealthy people relate to the passage of time, to status, to comfort, and to their own future. You do not need a higher income to start applying them. You need a different question, asked consistently, before every single purchase you make from today onward. So think about the last thing you bought without hesitation, and ask yourself honestly whether a person thinking in decades would have made the same choice. Finally, understand this. Wealth is not built the day you earn more. It is built the day you start refusing what almost everyone else says yes to.